our risks come more from nuclear threats, not conventional warfare invasions.
Okay. The question again was on in terms of nuclear. Well, I guess I would say, take a look at what our foreign policy has done to us. I mean, we could look at either North Korea or Iran. In the case of Iran, if you look at a map, they've got a United States Army on the Iraqi border. They've got a United States Army on their Afghanistan border. They're under a lot of pressure. They have economic sanctions on them. They don't have although they're very oil rich, Iran does not have a single refinery. So all of their gasoline for all of their cars is actually put back into the country. They're very threatened, is what I'm trying to say. And if you study history, like for instance the CIA coup with Mossadegh in 1953, which led to the reinstallation of the Shah, which basically ran a police state for about 30 years. What we end up doing is our foreign policy, by having those armies out there in the field, actually creates the incentive for these nations to defend themselves, because they figure, if they have a nuclear weapon, they'd actually be able to defend themselves against the United States. So I'm not saying to do nothing, but what I am saying, and this is actually part of it's in the plank that's on the Iraq War that's on the website right now, is basically, what can we offer these nations? The American foreign policy is basically either bombs or sanctions. Bombs or sanctions. We don't actually use any of the other things. So the weapons I would use would be let's wage peace, let's extend honest friendship, and let's extend trade. And like I highlighted a bit earlier, with the economics of the free market, a lot of those things would come about. So it is a difficult topic, but that's my answer. If you have further questions, feel free. More questions? Okay, go ahead, George.
In one of your other talks, you commented on the great mistake of '68 with Bernard Bernanke in 1968.
In 1968, that was the London Gold Pool, or are you referring?
No. It was just the great mistake of '68, and I wanted you to elaborate.
Okay, I'm not quite sure, because I think probably the great mistake of '68. In terms, do you remember what it was on? Was it on the Federal Reserve or? Well, yeah, I mean the Federal Reserve. Okay, there is an article that I wrote a couple weeks ago. It actually went into detail on the gold standard in the Great Depression. And basically, Ben Bernanke, the chairman of the Fed, had his whole career based on his whole academic career, and the reason he was selected to be Fed chairman was based on two things. First was he proved that the gold standard, I quote, proved, the gold standard actually hindered economic recovery during the Great Depression. And number two, he basically said that, in a very famous speech about helicopter drops of money, that the Fed could solve any problem by basically dropping money on everyone else. So I'm not quite sure exactly what I was referring to. The article is also on the website called Bernanke's Great Lie. I think it's the gold standard in the Great Depression. And also, I'm also running for United States Congress in the district, so if you have other questions that aren't related to this talk, you can also ask them as well. I'll try to answer them as best I can. Please.
One of the theories that I heard to the crisis we're in right now is that the labor pool after about 1970 continued to grow, but spending power did not, because wages did not continue to increase. They didn't have to increase them, because production could continue to increase. And then you have, wages stagnating and production going way up, and then the gap in between becomes what people take for profits. And that with that labor pool, labor continues to become cheaper and cheaper with the introduction of more and more technology. How is that labor pool addressed?
The question is, I agree with a lot of what you said.
Yeah, they said the labor pool just continues to get bigger and profits continue to go up, so now they start lending money instead of giving higher wages, which have been stagnant since the 70s.
Okay.
And the lending is what caused the bubbles that we're in now. So how is that larger labor pool the ultimate problem addressed? How would the people be put to work, basically?
Sure.
And to be created.
And I'm trying to think if I have a slide that could better demonstrate what I mean. Let me show you this slide, which I hope I have in this presentation. If not, it'll take me 1 second to bring it up. Okay, 1 second, please. Because like you said, a lot of the things that is inherently true, like if you go back to the 60s and 70s and ask the people that were alive at that time, what you often had is basically, typically it was the husband worked while the mother raised the children. And these days, you don't really see too much of that going on. What you see a lot of is, daycare and both parents working, which in a lot of cases, and if that's voluntary, that's fine. But actually in a lot of cases, what we have is, But in a lot of cases, what we have going on is, sorry, I lost my train of thought. This presentation actually doesn't have it. I need to go to my financial crisis presentation. 1 second, I'll bring up the chart, which I think will reveal quite a bit. It's a very simple graph on something called the real interest rate, and it actually starts in 1970, which covers the whole area that you're talking about. Come on, load.
Down, 2010, yeah.
That's right. Okay, this is a graph that I created using Federal Reserve data and also from shadowstats.com. This is something called the real interest rate, and I think really more than anything else, it describes what's actually occurring. Because you can also say, like for instance, back in 1970, we didn't have computers and all these great technological gadgets and that type of thing. But there is something to be said for needing to work a lot harder. And this graph actually shows quite a bit of what's been happening. And during the 1970s, there was actually fairly rampant inflation. But let me first explain what the chart is. The real interest rate is like if I had $100 and I put it into the bank, that would earn interest on it. Like right now, maybe 1%, so I get $1 at the end of the year. But there's inflation going on at the same time. And if the inflation rate is larger than the rate of interest at the bank, I'll be losing purchasing power. So even though my number of dollars is going up, my purchasing power is going down. And what ended up happening, if you take these numbers, and I use the Fed funds rate as basically a very optimistic number for the bank account interest rate, and I subtracted the inflation rate from actually up through 1980, which is here on the graph. It starts in 1970 over here. This is 1980. This is where we are right now. What occurs is this chart, and actually in 1980 we had a high of 9%. And this was actually, the Fed chairman was Paul Volcker at the time, and he was squeezing out the inflation using pretty draconian methods. But we still had comparatively speaking, our manufacturing sector was quite a bit stronger in 1980 than it is in 2009. And we were pretty much able to pull through it okay. But look what happened. In 1990, the rate went negative, and once it went negative, it basically just stayed negative. And as of last year, if you put $100 into the bank, you are losing about 7% of your purchasing power. So, I guess the question is, what's happening to that purchasing power? Is it just disappearing? And the obvious answer is no. It's where it's going is it's going overseas. In the last 10 years, it's going to fund wars. And inflation is basically a hidden tax. And that hidden tax is able to, by adding more dollars into the system, they're actually able to steal right from your wallet without you even, without the money actually ever leaving it. So what we have going on there is basically capital destruction. A lot of our corporations, a lot of our firms have been moving overseas. A lot of times for, in some cases, lower comparative labor, but in a lot of cases just because we've done this to our currency. We've made it easy for, so anyways, I think I answered your question, but if not, just let me know.
You'd be able to increase purchasing power with the money that people already had, right?
Say again?